Today, we have a special guest, and we're going to talk about head game. We're going to try and get inside the brain matter of ourselves, because as a business owner, you're going to have to master yourself before you can ever hope to master your business.
The Mammoth Plumber Podcast with Tyler Williams on the mic. He's dropping marketing gold, making your business spike.
So today I'm bringing on my own executive coach who has helped me tremendously over the past couple of years in my own business and with my headspace. It's Kerry Turnbow, and he is got a counseling background with mental health and is a professor of psychology at the University of Alaska Fairbanks. And many years ago, I took his class. And so, Kerry, thanks for coming aboard and doing this for me. I think this.
Oh, you're welcome. Very glad to be a part of this, Tyler.
So you and I have worked together. Well, we've known each other for a long time because I took your class, and like you've been in my family background for a while. But we've been working professionally together. Well, you were a client way in the olden days before we started working with plumbers. But after that, like I started hiring you about 2 years ago, right?
Right.
And we've been through some phases.
Absolutely, we have.
We've worked through some issues, and we can go into those if we need to. But one of the things that I noticed, like as I'm talking to plumbers, a lot of these guys are new. And so one thing I wanted to know, just to kick us off, is what are some early challenges that you see that are relatively consistent with people when they're starting a business, going out on their own, doing this for the first time? And like, what are the things they probably aren't expecting but will encounter up here? Because that's what I realized. So I had to get my head on straight before the business could really grow.
Right. Well, and also thank you. Thanks for inviting me to be a part of this podcast. I was very excited about it. Looking forward to the opportunity of sharing some of the insights that I feel like I've gained personally over the years, having started my own business many years ago, and then also writing a chapter in a book about it, kind of detailing some of my own experience and what I went through, the challenges to launch from the safety net of being a part of an organization out on my own, and realizing that there's a lot of risk involved in how am I going to manage that personally. So your question, what does it take, or what are some of the things that new business owners face? I think the biggest challenge, if I take it from my own perspective, was myself. How do I manage the internal dialogue that goes on regarding just whether I'm going to make it or not? So you've got the comfort of being in a place with another organization where, you collect a paycheck, and then all of a sudden you realize going out on your own, the paycheck is dependent upon myself. And that raised a lot of internal turmoil for me in regards to, can I do this? That was the biggest question. Can I make it? What happens if I fail? So those are the questions that continue to crop up in my mind. And what I realized in working as an executive coach, and my own background in mental health, as both working as a counselor, working as an executive coach, and teaching psychology classes, is that the struggle is not necessarily external in the sense of the market and making a business work, which is a part of it, obviously, but it's within myself. And that self-struggle can be the thing that sabotages us the most. And I worked with a guy many years ago, keeping this very vague, but the guy told me that, and he was a very successful business person, he told me that one of the challenges he had was really out of a message that continued to flow through his brain based upon a message that a family member had given him. One of his primary caregivers had told him over and over that he was pretty much good for nothing. And he said, Kerry, what I have to deal with on a daily basis, and I've cleaned up the language there a little bit, that on a daily basis, he said, the challenge is that I live out that message that that person gave me on a continual basis. And so it doesn't necessarily have to be, someone gave us that message over and over in our life, but it can be a message that we picked up that we carry with us. I'm not good enough. I don't have the intelligence enough, or I don't have the capacity to be able to make sure that stepping on my own is going to be successful. So what you and I did together, we started with what I call is that what I utilized was what's called the Taylor-Johnson temperament analysis. And it's a temperament inventory that begins to demonstrate the strengths as well as the propensities of challenges that play out in our temperament or our personality. And therefore, out of that, I utilize that to see for you, and I've taken it myself. I did it back in graduate school, and I found it to be a tremendous help for me as I went forward in my career to see. And I used it a lot to say, all right, I know that I have a propensity toward being a little bit negative. And so if something happens that, in every business, you're going to have challenges. When those challenges happen, then I could go to the negative side of something. So when I knew that that was my propensity, then I could work against that and utilize that information in a positive way.
Well, I remember when we took that, because I'd taken personality tests before,
right?
But what struck me about that one is how really how on point and how detailed it went. Because if I remember right, and correct me if I'm wrong, I feel like I should remember this, but mine came back basically, and you're like, okay, cool. So finishing projects is a challenge, always has been, all those things. But what struck me was it pinged me for anxiety and depression a little bit.
Correct.
Right. Which were things that I absolutely, I could not deny that. Because when something, and the way this would manifest in my business life is, something didn't go the way I wanted to, which would then send me into a tailspin of activity, and my actions didn't always align with what was healthy for the business. It was just healthy for my head game at that moment. It's like a sugar rush. So, but that thing was handy. And I think that helped, that sort of set us on the foundation. And which all came down to, we talked a lot about fear in the beginning.
Yes. Right.
Which is really not as much conversation these days. So, but, so do you find that most people aren't self-analyzing themselves enough to even know what the challenges are that they're having? I think a lot of people just make actions happen without realizing whether or not they're good or bad sometimes.
I think people that move into business, they typically have a good business mind for the most part. What we fail to recognize, I think a lot of young business people fail to recognize, is that internal mechanism that has to be healthy enough to be able to work interpersonally within the context of the relationship, whether it's employees or your customer base. You've got to be able to manage both of those challenges. And for me, understanding that about you, when you would talk about at the beginning, when that business was growing and challenges are going to come up, right? They're inevitable. So what was happening with you internally, based upon what I could see in that particular assessment that analyzed your temperament profile, I could utilize that as kind of a springboard or a backdrop to asking you questions, because it's not my job to try to fix you. It's not my job to try to manage your business. But I feel like as a coach, my job is to help you to see those blind spots and ask the appropriate questions so that it gets you to thinking about those things. And then when you're stuck, maybe to help walk you through those things, but you have to do the journey on your own. And then as time went on, you recognized when something would happen, and then we would work on an internal dialogue and your belief sets to be able to work through that anxiety, to become accustomed to it, and then recognize, hey, if I do this, if I make a different choice, then the outcome can be favorable. And once you get used to making those different choices, then it becomes sort of second nature. It's making a different choice, creating different habits.
Well, so getting used to it is something that I didn't realize until, years in with business, and then how deep that rabbit hole goes. And I've told people this when I talk to, so I end up on these marketing consults, and I end up talking to guys who are either starting out or thinking about starting out. And some people are nervous and scared because it's the first time they're dealing with situations, right? So one thing I've told them, maybe this is wrong, you can correct me, but I go, listen, some of the stuff that feels like a mountain today is going to feel like a molehill tomorrow. Like,
right.
Some of this is just acclimating to what business is, which is constant, intensive problem solving. And yes, that's part of the game, and it's fun.
Right.
So, well, it's fun once you accept it, I guess. Right.
Yes.
So that mental fortitude, like, what do you recommend people do when they first start out and they don't have that sort of like thick skin or thick mental membrane, I guess? Are there things that they can do to sort of prepare them for the challenges ahead that you would recommend?
Well, let me take it from this perspective. So internally, we have mechanisms that are at work. Our central nervous system is constantly gaining information from the outside world, storing in our brain. So new experiences, old experiences come together to create an emotional response, a physiological response, and then a cognitive response. So in the world of psychology, what is interesting to psychologists is the autonomic nervous system, our sympathetic and our parasympathetic nervous system. And the way that they typically operate as creatures that are made up of physiology, emotions, and cognitions, is when we are in crisis mode or something is happening around us. And it can be good. You go to a ball game, your team wins, the sympathetic nervous system goes, yeah, that was great. Or if you're almost in an accident, your sympathetic nervous system goes, whoa, that was scary. So when you're going into business, then all of these components that begin to play out, especially if you're moving into a new area that you're not accustomed to, then that internal mechanism it's always in operation. And so once the crisis is over, whatever happens, then fortunately we have another part of that autonomic nervous system called the parasympathetic nervous system that's kind of like the brake. Then it says to me, all right, Kerry, then let's just slow down and take it easy. Let's get everything back to normal. And then we kind of come back to calm. For some people, that mechanism isn't operating like it should based upon past experiences or whatever. You can have, generalized anxiety. You can even go to the fact of different kinds of disorders. So the point is that we bring all that into business with us. And then therefore, whatever is happening around us externally in the context of that business, then our self-awareness, knowing how we're going to operate on the external stimuli and how it happens internally, is a part of what helps us to be able to cope with the experience that's happening within our business. So going back to your question, in how do you manage that in the context of a new person going into business? It's a matter of understanding how that operates internally. What are my belief sets? Oh, this is awful. I've got a staff person that's constantly driving me nuts. This is terrible. So how do we reframe those messages to say, this is a part of doing business, how do we work with that person to try to instruct them, train them, and to develop them if we can? Or is it time for the organization to move on without this person? And so as a coach, my responsibility is to kind of get inside, as you said earlier, inside your head, and let's get to the processes going on, and let's work with them so that when you make good decisions, they're not based upon just an automatic response that is impulsive and that gets you in trouble. I heard an example of this many years ago when I went to a workshop, and this particular individual utilized the aspect of the horse and rider. And having grown up on a farm, and one day riding my cousin's horse, that I jumped in the saddle and he took off with me, and I could not get that horse to stop no matter how much I pulled on the reins, to the point that I bailed off of him because it scared me to death. So he utilized this metaphor to say, inside of us, we have sort of a horse and rider. And whenever an experience happens where the horse takes off out of an emotional response, fear, anxiety, whatever it might be that is causing that horse to run, then a good rider knows how to pull back on the reins, knows how to get that horse to correct itself and to respond to the commands. So it's teaching people, utilizing that analogy, it's teaching people how to, when the feels like the horse in our mind wants to take off because there's something happening around us in the organization or within us, whatever, then whoa, we're going to pull on the reins, we're going to step back, and we're going to try to look at this more objectively, and then therefore affect the outcome.
Yeah. What's interesting is there's that almost fight or flight, right?
Yeah. Fight, flight,
kicks,
or freeze. Some people have added freeze to that. We just
freeze. Well, okay, so that
stop.
actually, because one of the things that I had to work through was quickly making tough decisions.
Yes.
And that, like, if you look at the world of business, there are people who are in tune with just making fast, quick decisions. And I've been counseled by another business owner before. Like, I took them an issue and I was like, what should I do in this case? And they're like, you should spend as little time as possible on this and move on, because that is a appropriate use of your energy. And I was like, oh. Now, what I found was sometimes I would avoid making decisions or avoid looking at issues because I just didn't want to deal with what was an unfortunate situation, right? And like you mentioned, sometimes you gotta have the hard conversations and make the hard choices. That's part of the gig. And that has been another thing that I found myself struggling with. Way better now, as you've seen. So like, okay, this needs some attention. Let's dive in. But it's interesting, like seeing the evolution. So at what point do you think people need a coach, need an executive coach, because I have my opinion, which I'll save until you're done. But when do you think people should seek out an executive coach to work on their headspace in relation to their business?
Prior to opening their business.
Okay,
and
here's the reason
I wish
why. I had done it years ago.
Hey, we agree. I don't know that I would have said that many years ago. Now I see the validity of it up front. I'm getting ready to enter into a new adventure. I'm going to start my business. So what am I bringing into that? What can I be aware of personally so that in the startup at the beginning, I have a self-awareness that, I mean, we all bring our dysfunction, whatever it is. There's none of us that are perfect, right? So we're going to bring some of this into it. And I would go back to the early years I was put into a position of leadership right before my 22nd birthday. And I mean, it was a big position of leadership. And within 5-6 years of leadership, I had advanced to another level of leadership. And I quickly realized how inept I was at certain aspects of being in that position. I had education, I had gone to school, and so at some level I was successful, but it was it was a lot of those internal struggles that I was dealing with that I made a mistake of just keeping to myself. And therefore, the longer I kept it to myself, the more that it began to unrattle me emotionally. And it wasn't until I reached out for help to get the support that I needed that I began to see a change in myself. So, going back to my statement, having that understanding up front and beginning that with getting the support that I needed up front would have saved me a lot of headache.
Yeah. Well, and I can attest to that too. Like, I wish I had hired you in this capacity way before, right?
Right.
And what eventually caused me to do it, I guess I should put this on the record, is for context, like Kerry was uh, part of an organization that was a client of ours before we really made the pivot into just plumbers. And so you and I were always talking and sort of around each other, but around that time that business was bought out and shut down. Well, just you weren't a client in the same way anymore.
Right.
But the owner of that business reached out and said, "Hey, you should talk to Kerry about this because this really helped him." And I was like, okay, well, I like Kerry. Let me talk about it. And then that's when this started, right? But I think I was ill-equipped to run the business beyond a certain point. And I had reached barriers that I was struggling against. I wanted to make this shift into only plumbers. I wanted to grow beyond the state walls. I wanted to really change the face of the company, but I don't think that I had the fortitude to make those decisions right at that time. I knew they needed to be made, but it was nerve-wracking. It was a big pivot on a business that was already running, already had a revenue stream. It was like steering a big ship into new waters. And so it didn't happen overnight, but I can say, like, without a doubt, your influence and us working together really helped pinpoint some of the places that I needed to work on that were invisible to me. And I can't help but go, how much further would I be? How much faster could I have gone if we had done this at least 2-3 years prior? Because now, in hindsight, I go, oh, of course that was I was a problem. I was in my own way, and you helped me get out of the way and actually become an asset to myself. And so I appreciate that. Thank you. But I do. I think if you're thinking of starting a business, make sure you've got the head space to deal with it, because it's going to put stress in your life. It's going to put challenges in front of you. And unless you're ready to deal with those, you're going to find that you're making decisions with data that is incomplete because you haven't dealt with this. So I think, if somebody's thinking of starting a business, they should just call you immediately.
Well, what's important right here, Tyler, is timing. I was thinking as you were talking, would you have been ready for that at the beginning? And then the person we're talking about, the reason why we formed a relationship was that person was in crisis when he contacted me. And therefore I moved in because there's something I think there's various factors that lead us to that place. Usually it's crisis of some kind. But I think if I look at myself back at the beginning and saying I needed a coach up front prior to beginning this particular position I was in, I don't know that I was ready. Was I really ready to listen and to be vulnerable and to open up to allow a coach to see inside of me, because back then when I was young, I was very self-protected. I was intimidated by the self-revelation. I didn't want somebody to see that I was insecure, that I lay down at night, my head hit the pillow, and I had this fear of failure. I didn't want people to know that. I wanted people to see me as, a person in control. I got it together. And yet underneath all of that was a level of insecurity and vulnerability that I did not want exposed. So going back to the beginning, yes, but are you ready for that? And can you hear when someone speaks very directly at something to say, or to deny it? In fact, I remember one time I had this guy speak into my life. He kind of gave me some, he asked me a question about something and I lied to him. I totally lied and covered up what he had seen and was wanting to sort of support me and help me. And I just flat out lied to him. And I look back at that moment, it's like, man, look at all that was there of self-protection, denial, and kept you stuck in that for several more years until you were finally willing and able to look at it and say, I need to deal with this.
So I think there is some of that. I used to look down on the idea of self-development resources. I used to, I don't know where it came from, some of me growing up the way I did or whatever, but I was like, oh, I don't need this. I can figure it out. Everybody should be able to figure it out. You don't need coaches and counseling, and you don't need to read all these business books or things like that. And I have 100% turned a corner on that. But honestly, if I really look back and think about it, it was my own immaturity that would keep me in that zone. I think that if anybody's listening to this and they go, oh, I don't need to, I'm like, okay, well, that's a pretty big sign that you probably need something.
Probably,
but I have found, really, here's the way that I encapsulate the work that we've done together. I didn't have the skills, no more than I didn't have the skills to work Photoshop when I first opened a computer 20 years ago, right? When I first started going into that zone, I didn't know where the buttons were. I didn't know what to look out for. I didn't know how to use the system in my head. And what we have done is slowly not just give me the tools, but understand how to use them. And it's not like I go, oh, I put this into this framework. You and I don't work quite like that. Maybe for some people that's the way it should work, but I am far more equipped these days to deal with the challenges and deal with whether it's personnel issues, whether it's client issues, whether it's just me trying to figure out, okay, what's our next thing? All of that. I just didn't have the mental tools.
Mm-hmm.
And if I really sit down and try and put a box into what we've done, is we've created a toolbox for me.
Sure.
And it has sped me up so much in business. And it's helped me identify things so much faster, helped me work through things. It's been amazing. So that's, I think that those who, and I've encountered this talking to business owners, where they're like, everybody's this way. And I'm like, or are they not? And you just don't know how to manage that yet. And so I would chalk up some of the resistance to coaching. It's really an immaturity and it's a bit of arrogance. So I'll call it.
I can do this by myself, Mike Cracky. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, this has been a good conversation. I might bring it back on eventually to talk more. But we should probably wrap it up because we're hitting close to the 30-minute mark. But Kerry, how should people get a hold of you if they want to hire you?
Easy, Tyler. You can go to my website, which is hopeconcepts.com, and there's a button on there that you can push and you can contact me through the website.
All right. Again, thank you for coming on. I think that this is one of the things that people struggle with. And again, I am going to sing Kerry's praises because I don't think I could have built my business up to this point without his help. But so we'll wrap it up there. We'll have a good one.
Want to grow your business? Here's the plan. Go to TylerWilliams.net and be the top in the land. Now let me tell you the epic tale of how Tyler Williams became the marketing man. His story begins when he was just a year-old lad. His mother needed a plumber, but their ads were so bad. The house flooded and sank, and young Tyler was mad. Swallowed by the earth, into the abyss they fell. He blamed the bad marketing that led them to this hell. At 1 year old, he vowed to the stars above he'd harness marketing power and give plumbers some love. He's Tyler Williams, the marketing baby. From tragedy he rose to bring plumbers joy. With a vow to the stars and a plan in his hand, he's the one who'll save them, the marketing baby. 10 years later, he set out on a quest to find ancient secrets that would make him the best. He tamed Mark the Mammoth and rode the wilderness fast, fighting bland campaigns, leaving them in the past. In a glowing cave with lights so bright, he found a dead wizard clutching tablets of might. For 30 long years, he studied those stones, deciphering marketing secrets that shook him to his bones. He's Tyler Williams, the marketing boy, imbued with power, turning pain into joy. With fire in his eyes and stone-carved campaigns, he brings plumbers the truth to ease their pains. Years later, he emerged from the cave, riding Mark the Mammoth, a legend so brave. Back to Alaska with tablets in tow, he chiseled new ads ready to make them glow. His campaigns were epic, like discovering fire. Plumbers would soar, lifted ever higher. He hit the launch button, the world wasn't prepared. Neighborhoods flooded with jokes as Tyler declared. After 40 long years of learning marketing power, the baby became a boy, the boy became a man, and now Tyler Williams finally became the fabled marketing man. He's Tyler Williams, the marketing man, bringing plumbers out of the Stone Age as fast as he can. With jokes and memes, he blankets the land. Soccer moms swoon, it's all part of the plan. Now Tyler roams the world with boldness and might, crafting campaigns that set everything right. He's bald, bearded, with glasses in place, laughs at his jokes, but they're never out of place. With a smile and a wink, he launches the show. His ads are dumb, but they make plumbers grow. He's the marketing man, with campaigns so grand, bringing plumbers out of the Stone Age as he planned. So when you see Tyler, remember his quest. He's the marketing man who's simply the best. Bald and bold, with a mission so grand. He's Tyler Williams, the marketing man.